Hello, and welcome back to our latest episode of Pennwriters Presents. I am Joy Gibbons, joined here as always by my lovely co-host, Rhonda Battenfelder. And we are super excited today to welcome accomplished author and literary agent, Eric Smith of PS Literary. He is just a master of all trades, and we cannot wait to hear more about his unique journey in the industry. Eric, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm very flattered. I don't know about master of all trades, but I'm trying.
Achiever of all trades. Yes.
Frequent attempter of all trades is good.
All right. Well, let's get right into it with your different roles that you have played in this industry. Can you kind of take us through where you got started and what led you forward as an author and as an agent?
Yeah, sure. So I started working in publishing. Oh boy. Oh my goodness, it's been like a decade now. So okay, so it's been a while. But my first job in publishing was at Quirk Books, who's a publisher here in Philadelphia. We did books like Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and lots of very weird, appropriately quirky books. And I was there for about 5 years, doing a lot of the social media and digital marketing and blogger publicity and just a whole bunch of hats while I was there. And it was really fun, but I really wanted to be an editor. That was kind of my dream. I wanted to be the person working on the books, not just telling people about them. And I couldn't quite find anything. Philadelphia is a small city for publishing. There's only a few publishing houses here. And that's when agenting came along. I knew a couple of the agents at PS Literary. I'd become friends with a few of them. And when the job posting hit, I professionally sent a DM to one of my colleagues and was like, hey, do you think I should apply for this? And now here I am, and I've been an agent for about 6 years. So yeah, so I guess it's like 11 years in publishing. And let's see, while I've been at PS Literary, I've worked on a little bit of everything from literary fiction to sci-fi to memoir to lots of YA and lots of pop history. And it's been a lot of fun. That's the fun thing about being an agent. You can be a little selfish and work on just what you want to work on. And it's been a blast. And then I sometimes write my own books when I have time in between all of that.
Yeah, when do you have time? Like, do you sleep?
I do. I have like a pretty strict schedule for myself where, I work on. I'm also very tired. I have a toddler. I'm sorry to everyone who's seeing me yawn. But yeah, I work my pseudo 9 to 5 every day, depending on what childcare looks like for the individual day. And then Friday, that tends to be my day, and I'll write all day. Sometimes when the baby goes to bed, I'll write a little bit, at night, like 10, 11 o'clock at night. But I don't know, when you have a demanding job and an active family life, you have to find the time, and that's it. I find it and steal it when I can, and then I try to make the most of it and be as protective of it as I can be.
Mm-hmm. That's a great schedule, and especially Joy and I also as parents and as writers, we always love hearing how people are finding that balance and we love the great ideas of when you can kind of steal those moments away for yourselves. So how do your dual roles play off of each other? Does being an agent affect the way you approach a story and vice versa?
That's such a good question, because I wish it did, like I wish my agent brain and my author brain could work together, because then I wouldn't write books that were unsellable. I definitely have like very weird YA ideas all the time. I wrote a whole musical theater book that didn't sell. I wrote a whole YA alternate history book that didn't sell. Because I'm just, I don't know, I'm a big believer of, write what my heart is telling me to write. Who cares about the market? Who cares about this and that? But then the market cares and tells me no. But I don't know. Even when that happens, I feel like the way to go is to write about what you care about, and not necessarily what the market is telling you to write about. So I don't know. They don't inform each other. I wish they did, but they don't. The only way they tend to I don't know, bump heads a little bit is when I'm working with a client and I have a book and I'm like, all right, time to pitch this around, but I'm not going to pitch it to this one editor who is my editor on my last 2 books, because it gets weird and messy. And no one ever complains about that. So it's fine.
Sure. Um, I like your point that you write what you want to write. And you write kind of where your heart is in these stories.
Yeah.
I know you've done several books now. You're prolific at this point. You've got several anthologies and The Geek's Guide to Dating, an adoption themed anthology. You've got so much. I read your latest Don't Read the Comments, and my gosh, this book is wonderful.
Thank you.
I am not a video game person. And this whole book is about teens who meet through a video game world, through virtual reality. The world building in a virtual world was so fun for me as a non-gamer. It was immersive. How did you develop this story, and what inspired it for you?
Thanks. Oh goodness, thank you. Oh boy. So in terms of how the world building is developed, so I play a lot of video games, probably too many.
With your spare time.
Yeah, in the time there. And the world of Reclaim the Sun, which is the game in the book, was really inspired by the video game No Man's Sky, which is just this big open world exploration game with generated planets and all of that stuff, and then mashed that together with games like EVE Online, which is very intricate in terms of the economics in the game and the money that gets traded around. And then sort of squished that together with World of Warcraft and the way people can socially interact in those kind of games, and just kind of squished them together. And then thanks to a very careful editor, Lauren Smolsky, she's not at Inkyard anymore, but I know she does freelance editing, so look her up if you need somebody. She was the one that really helped me focus the game and make it make sense, because there's a lot of, in the original draft of the game, like all the characters put on VR headsets and like ran around and did all this stuff that really doesn't exist yet. And she kind of made it more realistic and helped me get focused a lot. So it's a mix of my favorite games mashed together with a very smart editor who helped make it feel a little bit more real. And that's what good editors do. They help you tell the story you want to tell in the best way possible. And she definitely did that a lot. As for the way the story came about with these 2 kids finding each other in the game, it was inspired a lot by something that was sort of going in full swing at the time when I was writing it, Gamergate, which was and is, it continues today, just a online cyber harassment campaign against women in the games industry, and then gradually became even more toxic and attacked like everybody. It's terrible. I had a lot of friends that were getting swept up in it, and at the time, my wife and I had moved away. We were living in Virginia and left Philadelphia, and my safe space was suddenly everything online. Like all my friends were online, all my family was online, and I kept thinking about that, and then the situation I was in, and like what would it be like to have that safe space taken away from me by people that just don't want me to be there because I'm a person of color. And that's how Don't Read the Comments came about. The what's it like to have the space that's supposed to be safe for you be made unsafe by people who have no real reason not to want you there.
Wow. Thank you for taking us through it. And I think one thing that also really struck me in reading it was how sensitively you wrote a dual POV. You had a female character protagonist in Divya, and then a male protagonist in Aaron, and how both voices were distinct, and you handled them both very authentically.
Yeah.
Do you think it helped having a female editorial team in that approach, or what was your approach to writing a female main character as well alongside a male main character?
Yeah, so it's a mix of things. It's a mix of reading as much YA as possible. I read a ton of YA. Most of the YA I read are they're written by women who are amazing at their craft, and it's a mix of that and just having wonderful female friends. Divya is based on 2 very specific people in my life, and getting those people to potentially read it. As they're reading the book. the way I tried to balance it in terms of how they interact with one another, it's the idea of what it means to be a good ally to somebody. Like Aaron is just trying really hard in the book to be a good ally to her, but doesn't really know what he's doing, as he's navigating it. And he has a good friend that kind of corrects him a whole bunch in the book. But when you think about allyship, you also have to think about whether or not your allyship is welcome in that space. And that's something that he struggles with throughout the whole book. And I feel like that's what helps with the balance there between the two of them, where he's not overpowering the narrative by trying to be the hero, because that's not realistic. And at the same time, she's staying open to having this person in her life during this situation.
Cool. Thank you.
Talking about your process in writing that book, would you consider yourself more of a pantser or a plotter, or does it depend on the book that you're writing?
So I used to be a pantser. My first YA inked was a pantsed book. I just wrote it, and then I had an editor that took a chance on it and just chopped it all up because it was a disaster. I was very, very lucky. And my favorite story from that whole situation of pantsing that book is when I had my phone call with the audiobook narrator who was like, "So how do I pronounce this name, this name, this name?" And I didn't know. I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I just made them up while I was typing." That's bad. That's bad world building. So that was a difficult lesson there. So now I'm a big plotter. Don't read the comments, and this makes everyone really mad when I admit this, but like I wrote like a whole like giant like 10-page synopsis, and then I wrote the first draft in like 10 days. I went on a writing retreat and wrote the whole book, and it was terrible. Like, it was terrible. It was a terrible first draft. It was like 50,000 words. And then I spent like a year like editing it and having friends read it and getting notes on it before I even sent it to my agent to give it a look. So I outline absolutely everything now. My book that comes out this year, You Can Go Your Own Way, I outlined the whole book before I wrote it. And it's a good process. That way you're just kind of coloring everything in instead of like madly trying to paint when you don't know what the picture is going to be.
It's a very good analogy for it. Yeah. So in thinking about the way that you typically write, would you say that this past year has changed that at all? Going through the pandemic, going through just the year of 2020, what changed or didn't change for you?
Oh boy, what changed? I guess the stuff I wanted to write kind of changed a lot, right? So like 2020, all I read were adult rom-coms through 2020 to like kind of get me through it. I read a couple YA rom-coms too. Lauren Morrill's It's Kind of a Cheesy Love Story comes out soon, and that was like my favorite book. It comes out in a couple months. Just everyone go pre-order it. But I was just reading all these adult rom-coms because it was making me feel better about everything. So as a result, the next book I wrote is an adult rom-com. I don't know if it'll sell. My agent has it right now, but like what I read always just informs what I'm writing, at the time. You Can Go Your Own Way is a YA rom-com. So yeah, what I dove into for comfort ended up being what it was I wanted to explore, in my writing life. And yeah, I guess that's the big way things changed.
Speaking of your agent, can you talk to us a little bit about your relationship?
Yeah, so I work with Jennifer Azantian. She's amazing. The relationship, I mean, I feel like it's the same as everybody. Like I send her my wild ideas. She gives me notes. We're working on the rom-com right now. We just sold something that isn't quite announced yet. So, we have some stuff coming out. But yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like it's the same as everybody's. Maybe it's informed a little bit differently because we know so many of the same people. Like I'm gonna know the editors that she knows, and I feel like we're gonna have a really great time building submission lists together because we're gonna know all the same people. So maybe it's gonna be more collaborative, but it's a pretty new relationship. Like this is our first book together, the rom-com there.
So that was going to be my question. Like with what you're sending out, have you like contributed I think this editor might like it, or that editor, or are you hands off? You're like, no, I've got my clients and I'll do their networking.
I'm sure I'll have some suggestions, like here's an editor that I talk to a lot, maybe. But at the end of the day, like she's the agent. I trust her judgment. She might say like, oh, that editor you think you're friends with told me they don't like you. Like I don't know. So I'm gonna.
That's impossible.
I know you mentioned there are some things that haven't been announced yet, but is there anything else that you're working on now that you can kind of tell us about?
No, which is weird. It's weird to say. I do have like another anthology coming, and another YA novel, but I don't know, nothing I can talk about. That's weird. Yeah, I feel fancy.
Can you take us through, I think this would be really interesting to our fellow pen writers, through the process of creating an anthology? Like, how do you, like as an editor or contributor, how does that work? What does the process look like from concept to publication?
Yeah, so I could talk about me and Lauren and our project. So we have a book coming out called Battle of the Bands that's coming out with Candlewick. That project came about in a weird way because we were in an airport in Tennessee after a book festival at like 2 a.m, and she was like, I have this anthology idea, and she told me all about it, and we decided we'd work on it together. And that's a very odd way for projects like that to come about. But generally, when you're working on an anthology, you come up with an idea, like a core theme that's gonna travel throughout the entire book. Maybe it's a book about a Battle of the Bands. Maybe it's a book about, I have the adoption anthology I worked on. I worked on this lovely book that came out 2 years ago with Sengu Mandana. It's all about interracial relationships. That is just really, really sweet. And I love this book so much. You find that theme, you find that message you want to get across with your book, and then you find your contributors, that I feel like that's the most popular question though I get about anthologies is how do you become a contributor? How do you get in one? And I feel like the best answer to that is to like make friends with writers and sort of become a part of the community, because that's, when it came to Battle of the Bands, I was like, okay, we know which YA author friends of ours are big music nerds and were in bands as kids. Let's reach out to all of them. And that's how we did it, because we got to know all these people. It's tricky. So you have to become part of the community, meet some people. When it came to shopping around the book, we had the proposal together, we had the ideas behind all the individual stories, we had the fun little neat facts about every contributor. We included photos of ourselves from when we were 18 and in terrible bands as kids. It was a really funny book proposal. I think people really responded to that. And then that was it, you don't have to write all the stories, maybe have a couple if you want. And then you find a mix of contributors of people who are, potentially big names in the book world. They don't all have to be giant New York Times bestsellers, but you need some name power with the anthology. And then you go out and about. Most anthologies, they're 12 to 15, 16 people. And if you want a really nice breakdown of how to put one together, I recommend Googling Dahlia Adler. She's a YA contemporary author, and she has a whole like how to put together a YA anthology blog post on her website. It's awesome.
Fantastic.
Do you have any other recommendations as far as either craft books or anyone else online that you think would be good for either aspiring writers to look out for?
Yeah. I feel like my answer to the craft book question is always just like read voraciously in the category and genre you're writing in. Like that's where you're gonna learn everything. That's where you're gonna learn tone and voice and like what your narrator should sound like if you're writing YA or versus middle grade. Like that's big piles of books are your friend when it comes to that. But in terms of like books I'd suggest, so Beth Revis is a wonderful YA author and has a series called Paper Hearts that is God, I think they're only like $1 on the Kindle, and it's just packed full of really wonderful advice. I would listen to the podcasts Deadline City. Danielle Clayton and Zoraida Cordova run that one, and it's just packed full of wonderful advice. Write or Die by Clarabelle Ortega and Kat Cho is a really fun podcast that talks about craft a lot. I would follow writers like Chuck Wendig, Susan Dennard, Delilah Dawson, and Daniel Jose Older. They all talk about craft a lot. And Chuck has a really great craft book. It has like a jackalope on the cover. It's like a rabbit with horns on it, or is it a rooster? I don't know. Those are two very different things. But I know there's like an animal on the cover. It might be
Animal.
Yeah, he has a couple. He has a couple of them, but his most recent one, it's definitely a red cover. Was really good. Yeah, I feel like those are some nice starter pack there for you.
So for someone who reads and writes as prolifically as you do, what would you say is your, maybe not your favorite project, because I know that's like picking a favorite child. It's very hard to do. But what that you've written would you say you identify with the most closely, and why?
Oh boy. Looking at my books. It's a book that's not out yet. So I have this book called Origin Story that I haven't really talked about online that much, but I think it's going to come out next year. It's with Inkyard, and I co-wrote it with an author named Summer Heacock, who's a romance author in the West Coast. And it's a book about an adopted teen who discovers his adoptive mother had a biological child before she adopted him, and put that child up for adoption. So there's a secret brother out there that no one knows about because his mom has passed away. And when he's learning this, he's trying to navigate what he's going to do. This girl who runs a podcast called Origin Story that digs into the histories of adopted kids overhears it and decides to meddle and go find that brother without asking for permission. And it's a very, very messy adoptee story. I'm adopted. I have lots of issues about it. It's why my name's Eric Smith and I look as brown as I do. And yeah, it was definitely the most personal book and story I ever written. It was a lot of feelings in that book. So yeah, hopefully when it sees the light of day, it strikes a chord with people. And I try to write about adoption as much as I can, but that's the first time I've dug in that deep, I think. The Girl in the Grove is an adoptee book, but Origin Story is a lot closer to me, I think.
That's really interesting. And as a fellow adopted kid, thank you for putting more of those stories out into the universe. I think that's great, because
I'm trying.
Those stories are just as diverse as any other story, and I think the more representative they can be, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a hard thing. There's a author, Erin Bowman. She wrote this. I'm just pulling books out of the sky. This lovely book, Contagion, that was nominated for the Edgar Award. I'm kind of obsessed with her book. She's brilliant. She does all this genre jumping. I would like to be her when I grow up. But she has this whole thing where she talks about in the writing process how great it is if you're able to mine your own life for your work. And I love that. And I think about it all the time. But it's also something that is wildly painful sometimes. So yeah, take that advice, but do a lot of self-care while you're doing it. All of you writers who are listening.
Can you tell us anything about your critique partners? Do they change depending on what type of book you're writing, or do you have a consistent group of folks that read for you no matter what?
Oh goodness, I had an awesome critique group before I moved away from Philly the first time. It was like Catherine Locke, Randy Ribeye, just a wild amount of talent in just that crew there. But we all moved away, and then now we're all over the place. I don't. I wish I did, but when you're in the point where you have books coming out and all your friends have books coming out, people get really busy, and suddenly the person that critiqued your last book is not available at all to look at your new one. I actually wrote You Can Go Your Own Way without anyone reading it. Like, no one read that book until it was like blurb time, which made me sweat a whole bunch. But like right now with like the adult rom-com, like I have a couple of other YA author friends who are writing romance, and like we kind of formed like a group chat where we fire stuff off to each other once in a while. But it gets a little tricky because they have their own books, they have their own children. It's weird. You feel like it shouldn't get harder when you start having books coming out to find people to like critique stuff, but it does. It's weird. So if you have a critique group, hold on to them tight. Make sure you're always giving back as much as they're giving to you, because it can be really tricky to find people later down the line.
Continuing with that idea of collaboration, of working together and finding that group that you can depend on. What has it been like for you in terms of like co-editing or co-writing, especially with like something that's so personal? How does it work for you, kind of sharing that experience and sharing your visions for the project?
Yeah, I feel like Battle of the Bands and me and Lauren's like future anthologies, it's a little easier, because it's like other people's stories and we're just like working together. We hop on the phone, we talk on Google Chat, well, whenever we can. We keep like a big like living like monster Google Doc where we can like, because the way our anthologies work, all the stories mesh together in fun little ways. So we try to figure out how they're going to work. It's just a lot of communication, and that's kind of what makes it easy. Like if you're not the sort of person that likes to talk to somebody all the time, if you're the person that like failed your group project in high school, like co-writing's not for you. Don't do it, because everybody has to do the same amount of lifting. I feel like with me and Lauren, it's a mix of both of us doing the same amount of lifting, and then like her being just like so great at like communicating with all the individual writers about their changes and their updates, and then me doing some more of like the business stuff where I'm like wrangling the contracts and talking to the people. I think that's where like my industry experience comes in, and we just work really well together. I think we're gonna try to write a middle grade one day. Yeah, I think that's on the list of our goals because we work together really well.
Wonderful. Oh, Rhonda, you have a question next?
Well, I wanted to say thank you because on Twitter, when I first started to identify as a writer and reaching out to try to, gather more information, I feel like you've consistently been a very positive influence on Twitter. And I can always count on you for either something funny or a little boost of a little morale boost. And I appreciate that over, all this time that you're one of the people that we can kind of look forward to and count on for really lifting up the writing community. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
I completely agree. Whenever I see that Eric Smith Rocks has tweeted something, I'm like, oh, what's happening? Makes my morning. Again, because you see a lot more of this industry than the average writer, do you think that there are any, there are, what do you think are really gaps, places where we need more stories? Like what do you see as missing right now?
Yeah, I would love to see more stories that are in that like in between middle grade and young adult space, because like you don't really see a lot of YA novels with characters who are like 13 and 14 anymore. It's all like some 15 and then like 16 to 19. Like it's this big gap there. And then you don't see a lot of middle grade where the characters are like 14, 13. It's usually like 12 and then under. So there's this like sort of underserved little blip there. And I wish I knew what the answer was. Like maybe publishing taking more of a chance on those that sort of odd transitionary age bracket. Yeah, I'd love to see more stuff there.
All right, great. And we should probably do our due diligence here and ask you, for pen writers who are, looking to query or submit, what do you represent? Can you just take us through it?
Yeah. Let's see. So I'd say about like half my list are young adult books. So I work on a lot of kid lit, starting to dabble in middle grade a little bit more. Let's see, on the adult side, I like literary fiction that does genre blending. So it means it's a little weird. Maybe there's a ghost or magic or an apocalypse or something. Like that's what's going to get me. Like I'm not going to be excited about literary fiction that's just, I don't know, just about a family and that's it. Like I need the family to get blown up by something, like I need something in there that's exciting. I like select sci-fi and fantasy. It has to be accessible, it has to be something I can give to like someone in my family that's a non-reader, it's like my mom or something and she's still going to like it. I like sci-fi that feels like The Martian, or fantasy that feels like an Aaron Morgenstern novel. Like that's the kind of sci-fi fantasy I like. And then in nonfiction, I'm a little all over the place. I've worked on a lot of memoir. I like pop history. I like essay collections. I like wellness, cookbooks. Yeah, I'm a little all over. I've had some really fun books in the last couple months come out that I feel like are good examples of that. Mike Chen's We Could Be Heroes came out just 2 weeks ago. It's a literary novel about a superhero and a supervillain who help each other when they meet one another in therapy. It's very, very cute. Sex Witch by Sophie St. Thomas, which is all about magical spells for love and lust, that came out with Wiser. And then on Kid Innovators, a middle grade nonfiction book about children who have been trailblazers and what they were like when they were kids. What was Steve Jobs like as a child? YA fantasy. Here's Ruin Song that came out. It's a really lovely, inclusive YA fantasy novel set in a world where magic is sung.
I have to say, I scooped that one up for my sister for Christmas and she loved it.
Oh, excellent. And then Rise of the Red Hand, which is a YA cyberpunk novel set in South Asia. So yeah, a little bit all over the place. But accessible and hopeful are like my big needs on those lists.
What are you looking forward to in 2021 and beyond?
Conferences again. I want to go book festivals. I want to go to publishing conferences. I want to sit in a green room and gossip about book things. That's what I want. Really, really badly. And and to run around outside with my kid. That'd be fun.
Yeah. We all have cabin fever. Has Philly had a rough winter for snow and ice as well?
Not super bad, but we did get hit with that snowstorm last week. That was pretty intense. But
yeah,
we're fine.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that might be about all the questions we brought with us for today. You answered everything so efficiently.
Yeah, well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for Zooming. It's nice to see some faces,
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. And we really look forward to everything that's coming. I took so many notes and I can't wait for the new announcements and the books that are already in the process of coming out. So thank you for adding joy to our lives.
Thank you.
Yes.
For having me.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, don't read the comments. It's coming out in paperback this spring. Is that right?
Out in paperback in April.
Okay. So people will have multiple purchasing options. And Battle of the Bands comes out in November?
Yes.
Oh.
September. Battle of the Bands September. And You Can Go Your Own Way comes out in November.
All right. So it's going to be a busy and exciting year, and we look forward to following along.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, I will stop the feed now. So Eric, thank you so much again for joining us. Eric Smith of PS Literary and his own accomplished writing. And for Rhonda Battenfelder, I'm Joy Givens. Thank you for joining us for Pennwriters Presents.